Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So, the idea of understanding our youth in the modern age, the idea of their development in the modern age, in reality, it cannot be discussed in 1 hour where I give you all the keys and you go home and you're like, yes, now I know how to deal with my kids and my grandkids and everything. The reality is that it would take 20 to 30 sessions to get a full understanding of how to deal with your kids. And even after those 20 or 30 sessions, you'll ask questions, you'll have issues that you'll say, hey, those were not covered, right? And so the idea is that in order for us to make a change or help our youth, we have to first understand them. We have to begin somewhere. And so this is just the beginning. One of the big mistakes that parents make, educators make, teachers make, perhaps even imams make, is that when they look at their kids and when they look at their youth, the first thing that they want to say is, oh my son, oh my daughter, we were not like you when we were little. We used to be so respectful. We never used to fight with our siblings. We used to love our sister. We used to love our brother. And worse than that, some of the parents will even compare their children to the companions. And they'll say that, why aren't you like Zayd ibn Thabit? Why aren't you like Zayd ibn Thabit? Why aren't you like Abdullah ibn Abbas? Why aren't you like Abdullah ibn Umar? If some parents, they do that, right? But the reality is that Zayd ibn Thabit, he wrote the Quran at the age of 14, but there was no other 14-year-old boy in his time that was doing that. Abdullah ibn Abbas, he says that while I would study, the rest of the kids would be playing. So the normal setting that they had at their time is the same setting that we have at our time. But those are the exceptions to the rules, they are not the norms. And so comparing our kids to the Sahaba or comparing our kids to even ourselves is not right. Why? Because Ali radiallahu anhu, he said, لا تكرهوا أولادكم على أخلاقكم. That do not force your children to follow your akhlaq or your way of life or your mannerisms or what you went through. فإنهم خلقوا لزمن غير زمنكم. For they were created for a time other than your time. Meaning they're going to go through different problems, different issues. You can apply the same concept when it comes to Muslim leaders. You look, for example, at the Muslim leaders of today, and all of us, we probably said some bad words about the Muslim leaders of today very easily. And we say, why aren't the people like Umar radiallahu anhu? Why don't they have the justice of Umar? But the reality is, Umar was also an exception in his time, right? And so these people were exceptions. Most of the Sahaba could not come to the level of Umar. Most of the Sahaba could not come to the level of Abu Bakr. So comparing your kids and comparing the Muslim leaders of this time to those people is a very huge difference, right? Now, there's a difference. You can inspire your kids to be like those people, and that's good. There's no problem with that. But comparing them is wrong. You know, one of our teachers, he would say that, I wish that one of you would be like Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. And one of the students, he said, Sheikh, you have to understand that the only reason Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal was Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal was because Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal's father was a police officer and his grandfather was a governor. None of our fathers are a police officer, nor our fathers governors. So you can't expect us to be that. Maybe our kids will be that, but we won't be that yet. And so the reality is that these people, they had a specific bi'ah, they had a specific environment that allowed them to be that way. And so instead of asking, why are my kids not like those people, we should be asking, are we building the environment to create people like the Sahaba? Are we building the masajid to be like the time of the companions? If we're not doing that, then it's very hard. One of the great scholars, Ibn Abidin, a Hanafi scholar, he writes in his Hashiyat al-Durr al-Muhtar, he says that if you take a scholar, and this scholar knows all of the proofs of the world, they have all the adillah memorized, they know all the madhahib, all the schools of law, all the schools of thought, and then you take them from one land and you plop them into another piece of land, you are not allowed to take fatwa from them. And his students asked, why aren't we allowed to take fatwa from them? Because he said, al-hukmu far'un an tasawwurihi, right? That giving a ruling is dependent on understanding the situation that you live in. And so the kids that are in Palestine, the kids that are in Pakistan, the kids in India, the kids in China, the kids wherever they are that are in all the different countries around the world are very different from American kids. And so in the same exact way that you can't give if you're a scholar living in Saudi Arabia, you can't give a ruling for the people of America, in the same exact way the people of America should not be trying to take their, tarbiyah or methods of raising their kids from places that are other than the places where their kids are growing up from. And so the problems of the youth in America, the problems of the youth in the United Kingdom are drastically different from the problems of people somewhere else. If you go to the doctor right now, and the doctor prescribes the same medicine for all the kids. When I was in Saudi Arabia, if you go to some of the hospitals there, you have an eye infection, another person has another issue with the eye, a third person has another issue with the eye. What are they going to do? They're going to prescribe the same medicine for all three people, right? This is problematic. If you go to any doctor, the doctor will tell you that each person has a specific diagnosis. And so each child has a specific thing. Each group of people has a different thing. And so I want to share 5 main points with you that will allow you to understand your children and allow you to understand how they develop in this world. The first point is فَهْمُ حَقِيقَةُ الْإِنسان, understanding the reality of a human being in the first place. A lot of us, when we're looking at our children, when we're looking at our youth, especially I've been to masjids where they're like, Sheikh, we want you to talk about addiction and drugs and illicit relationships because that's what our kids are doing. I go and I sit down with the youth and I'm talking with them for 5 minutes about these topics and all of them are falling asleep. And I ask them a question, how many of you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend? 0. How many of you do drugs? 0. Was the topic relevant to these kids? No, it wasn't relevant at all, right? It is relevant to some kids, but guess what? They're not about to listen to it on a 1 on 500 speech. Maybe they'll have a one-on-one conversation with you. But those are not the biggest problems in the world, by the way. Those are all solvable problems. There's ways to deal with it. The problem is, why does somebody become addicted? Why does somebody want to drink alcohol? Why does your child feel like they need to have an illicit relationship before marriage? Why do they feel that way, right? And so the issue is not what is happening, it is why is it happening, right? And so you have to say, in Arabic they say, عِنْدَهُ مُشْكِلَةٌ مُعَيَّنَةٌ, that he has a specific issue in his life that caused him to want to smoke, that caused him to want to drink, that caused him to want to be addicted to something. And so until you figure out what that is, you will never know why your child is going through what they're going through, right? And so, again, the real problem is knowing why. And so the first thing is, what is the human being? The human being, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes it as وَاللَّهُ أَخْرَجَكُم مِّن بُطُونِ أُمَّهَاتِكُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ شَيْئًا. That Allah brought you out from the stomachs of your mother and you knew nothing. 0. Clean slate. Right? وَجَعَلَ لَكُمُ السَّمْعَ وَالْأَبْصَارَ وَالْأَفْئِدَةَ. Allah gave you hearing, Allah gave you seeing, and Allah gave you a heart. Right? And even within the heart, there's 40,000 neurons. So your heart is something that also understands things. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ, so that perhaps you will be grateful. Now, why is this ayah important to mention when it comes to understanding the human being in the first place? It's important because the human being is created knowing nothing. Everything is taught. There's no ghariza or natural instinct in the human being besides breastfeeding. There's nothing else. And I'll give you an example. If you take a baby cat or kitten, right? And you take a little child, and you put that little child and the kitten on the roof, and you put at the edge of the roof, you put a piece of candy or something that interests them. The kitten will go all the way to the edge of the roof, it will grab what it needs to grab, and then it will back off. It will move away from the roof. A child, a baby, will walk all the way to the edge or crawl all the way to the edge, and then what will it do? It won't stop there. It will jump over. And guess what? It will fall and it will get hurt, or worse case scenario, even something worse than that. Why? Because the child needs to be taught. The kitten has something instinctually. The scholars of tarbiyah, of raising and nurturing kids, they say that an animal has 95% of its instincts installed, only 5% is taught by its parents. The 5% is hunting for the cat, right? As for the human being, 100% has to be taught from somewhere, from the environment. And so the reality, what I'm trying to teach you is that a human being is makhluqun mu'allam. It's something that is taught. It needs to be taught to be better than it is, right? And so the human being does not naturally know how to eat or does not know naturally how to drink. You teach your kids here, this is how you use a spoon, this is how you do that. And they learn over time. And so the number one thing is that if you want to help your children, you have to understand them. And how do you understand them? You understand that they are human beings. بِالْعِلْمِ نَرْتَقِي وَبِالْعِلْمِ نَسْتَطِيعُ حَلَّ الْمَشَاكِلِ. That with knowledge we are able to rise up, and with knowledge we're able to solve the issues. The second thing is understanding the phase that they're in. Allah talks about their phase. He says, Allahu alladhi khalaqakum min ضعف ثم جعل من بعد ضعف قوة ثم جعل من بعد قوة ضعفا وشيبا يخلق ما يشاء وهو العليم القدير. That Allah has created every human being from a state of weakness. You're in the marhalat al-tufula, you're a child, you're a baby, you're a toddler. And then after this state, then there's a moment of strength, a moment of power. This is your youth, your middle schoolers, your high schoolers, your college. And then you have ثُمَّ جَعَلَ مِن بَعْدِ قُوَّةٍ ضَعْفًا وَشَيْبًا. Then you get old and you get weak, right? أَيَخْلُقُ مَا يَشَاءُ. Allah creates however He wills. وَهُوَ الْعَلِيمُ الْقَدِيرُ. Now what's the point of mentioning this ayah? The point of mentioning this is a lot of parents. Fajr time comes in. And now they have a choice. They themselves wake up for Fajr, hopefully, right? They wake up for Fajr. Their 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old, whatever it is, 8-year-old, 9-year-old is sleeping in bed. And they say, haram, like, oh, I shouldn't wake him up. He didn't sleep, 8.5 hours or 10 hours, 11 hours. Let me just let him sleep more, right? Oh, if he wakes up, he'll give me a headache or she'll give me a headache. Let them sleep more. You see their age as a weakness. They need more sleep time. Oh, they're children. They're not going to understand. But Allah does not view your children as weak. Allah views that stage in their life as a stage of strength, as a stage of power. Allah views the toddler as a weak person, and Allah views the old person as a weak person, but the youth is viewed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a person of strength. So deal with that person as a person of strength. This is the second point. The third point is what makes this stage unique. A lot of parents, they'll deal with their kids as if their kids are either really babies or their kids are really adults. Your children are in a middle phase. And the middle phase has something what we call khasa'is, traits. What are those traits? Number one is istiqlal. Your kids want to be autonomous. They want to be independent. They don't want to need their parents. A young man who's in the gym pumping iron, a young sister who's taking care of herself, they feel within themselves, عندنا قوة, we have strength, we have power, we have ثقة بالنفس. They're confident within themselves a lot of times. And they don't want to bend to anybody. لا يخدع لأحد ولو لآبائهم. They don't want to put their head down to their parents, to their teachers, nobody. They're like, I can do everything myself, right? Now what ends up happening is that a parent, a teacher, an educator, they see that, they're like, oh, this kid wants to be independent. Let me break that kid. Let me bend that kid. And what does the kid do? The kid retaliates, they rebel, or they just ignore you and they say, yeah, whatever, right? No problem. That's the response. This moment right there, where they feel they're autonomous, is not a moment to make them bend or to break or anything. It's a moment to have a hiwar. It's a moment to have a conversation. لا يقتنع بشيء إلا بالنقاش. Your kids will never be convinced without discussion. And you're like, well, my kids don't have any discussions with me. They don't like talking to me. That's true. Some kids don't like talking to their parents. But every kid, at one point or the other, tries to have a conversation with their parents. Their parents shut them down, and then after that, their kids never try again. Right? It's like when you're knocking on wood. It doesn't work after a while, right? And so, this is what happens. Let me give you an example. We had a young kid, he came to the masjid, and this was when I was in high school. We sent him to the imam of the masjid. This kid was an atheist. He was Muslim, but he became atheist. He goes to the imam of the masjid, and he says, oh imam, I don't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala anymore. Islam is rubbish to me. That's what his sentiment was. And the imam, he told the kid that if you don't believe in Allah, just go look at the star, the skies, the moon. That will show you that the creator is there. Do you think this kid is convinced? No. He's probably looking at it like this imam is psycho. Right? That's what he was thinking in his mind. This guy's crazy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. That's what that kid felt like. And he walked away and he came back to this and he's like, this man doesn't know anything. He didn't convince me for anything. right? The reality is that the only way to respond to that kid is with real knowledge. If you as a parent are like, I can't get through to my kid, it's because you're not responding to them with knowledge. You're responding to them with, I say so, so you do so. And that doesn't work. It doesn't work for you. If I told you right now, pray right now 500 rak'ahs, the first question that you're going to ask as an adult is, why? If I make up something in religion, the first thing that you're going to say is, that's bid'ah, right? You always have that sentiment. That's what your kids are being taught. They're being taught to be mustaqil, to be autonomous in schools. And here you are, we're using our old parenting techniques from back home to say, no, that doesn't work. But at the same time, we want our kids to get an education here. You can't have both things at the same time. I'll give you one story. And this story, whether it's true or not, is something that has an ibrah, has a lesson. A father, he was sleeping, and in this dream, he saw 3 masahif, 3 books. And one was really big, one was a middle size, and one was very small. The biggest size was burning. Those fire had completely burnt to a crisp. The second size also burnt to a crisp. The third one, the fire had just reached the edges, and the father, he sees himself in that dream, taking that and getting rid of the fire, and he gets saved. He has this dream multiple times. He says, let me go to the imam of the masjid. The imam is like, I don't interpret dreams, I don't know anything about this stuff, you have to go to so-and-so person. So the person, he's like, okay, I really need to figure out because I keep having the same dream. He goes to that person, and the person, he says that, the person that does Ta'bir Ru'a is not something that is, you can't read Imam Suyuti's book and now you know how to interpret dreams. It doesn't work that way. It's something that's mulham, it's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives to specific people like Yusuf alayhi salam. And so the person that's interpreting the dream, he says that you have 3 daughters, is that correct? And he says, yeah, I have 3 daughters. How did you know? He said, this is my job to know that, right? So he says, you have 3 daughters. And he says that each of them are in different phases of their life. One is like in the marhalat al-thanawiyya, one is in marhalat al-i'dadiyya, and one is marhalat al-ibtida'iyya, one is in high school, one is in middle school, and one is in elementary school. And he's like, yeah, that's exactly what my kids are at, all 3 daughters at those ages. He says, as for the oldest one and the middle one, you didn't do iqna' of them, you never convinced them, you used to tell them just do this and just do that, and now they're on the border of becoming non-Muslim. They're on the border of ilhad. The father, he becomes shocked. And he's like, yeah, I'm seeing that. They're not really practicing what I've taught them. As for the youngest one, and this is something that all fathers know, when you have 3 daughters, 4 daughters, or even just a daughter that is the youngest one, fathers, if you ask them the question, who do you love the most? Unlike the mothers who will say, I love my kids equally, the father will always say, I love my youngest daughter the most. That's the reality, right? And they'll give their youngest daughter the most attention in the world, right? And so he says, yeah, I love my youngest daughter the most. And when you have the youngest daughter, the father always tries to convince her, to make her happy, buys her gifts. He does whatever she wants, pretty much, right? He's at the beck and call. And the interpreter, he says that for that daughter, you used to actually respond to her in the right way because you learned of your mistakes with the first and the second one. But now it's too late for the first and the second one, unfortunately. The point of all of this and telling this whole story is that if you respond and you learn how to respond and you take the time, because I said this is only one lecture, it takes time to learn how to respond to your kids. It takes time to improve your language and the way that you speak to them, right? And so this is how you go about it, right? Our daughters, our sons, they don't go to their parents anymore, unfortunately. They'll go to their mentor if they have one, they'll go to their teacher, and most likely they'll go to their peer or their social media or their phone to ask questions. Why? Because if you go on TikTok, TikTok will convince you to buy anything, to wear anything, to do anything. But parents can't convince their kids anymore because they don't learn how to convince it. They're like, oh, why do I have to learn marketing techniques to teach my kids? You need to learn marketing techniques to teach your kids because that's what you're competing against. You're competing against the billion-dollar industry, and if you're using your few dollars to convince them, it will never work, right? And so this is something that we have to realize, that we are living in a different era. When I was in Mecca, small side story, small tangent, when I was in Mecca, I used to go to the different bookstores when I got the chance, because there's certain books that are in Mecca that are not in Medina, mostly because certain things are imported in a certain way. So when I was going, I went to one of the bookstores and I asked the owner of the bookstore, I was like, what is your most sold book? And he says the most sold book is Wahmu Wujudillah. This is in Mecca. So this is in the most holy city in the world. The book's title is Wahmu Wujudillah, which means how do I translate Wahm? Like the doubt of Allah's existence. Who is the author of this book? Richard Dawkins. And this is the most sold book in Mecca, in the Holy Land, in the land that Prophet ﷺ was born in, right? And so I asked him, why is this the most sold book? He said, because the scholars in Saudi Arabia, they don't address atheism, and that's why these kids are running to it. Nobody talks to them. Homosexuality there is also on the rise, by the way. Why is it on the rise in a Muslim country that's very restrictive? Nobody talks about it. Nobody tries to convince you that it's wrong. Alhamdulillah, in America, we have the fortunate thing that we can say whatever we want, however we want, and nothing happens to us, especially in our masajid. Our masajid are a safe place, right? Maybe at work it's a little bit different, but our masajid are a safe place. And so, the reality is we need to start having a conversation. I'll give you one example. This is not to point anybody out. A young girl, she tells her parents that I don't want to wear hijab, right? Or a young boy says, I don't want to pray salah. Or whatever it is, whatever issue it is. There are three methods of dealing with your kid. Two of them are incorrect and one of them is correct. And I'll show you what I mean by that. The first one is ijbar. Ijbar means forcing them. That you have to do this, otherwise get out of my house. Or you have to do this, otherwise I won't get you this. Whatever it is, we blackmail our kids. And the scholars, they say, al-ijbaru la yakunu da'iman wa la akthariya. That the effect of forcing your children does not work most of the time, always, nor does it work in certain scenarios, right? إِذَا غَابَ الرَّقِيبُ سَيَخْلَعْ حِجَابُهَا. That if the person that's watching over their child and commanding their child to obey disappears, then their children will do whatever they want, right? We watch movies and we always see the young children, they dress appropriately, but when they get to school, they change their clothes right when they're in school. This is a reality that happens to certain kids. You might think, oh, it's not my kid, but you never know, right? It's something that you can't plan for. This is the first method. The second method is what we call ighra, which is bribing your kids. What does that mean? If you do so and so, I'll give you this, I'll give you that, I'll buy you this, I'll buy you that. This works on little kids. It works on your children, like the ones that are in elementary school, maybe even middle school if you're lucky, if your kids are a little bit more obedient. It doesn't work on high schoolers, right? They'll take the bribe and then after that they'll do whatever they want, right? So, it's good to give your children gifts, like in Masjid Nabawi, they give each kid that memorizes one juz 100 riyals. It's not haram to do that, there's no problem with that. But the idea behind it is that we want them to also understand the importance of memorizing the Quran. So that's also, the teachers will talk to them about the ahammi of the hifz of Quran and so on and so forth to convince them. The third and the final method is niqash or iqna, conversations, talking, going back and forth. But this requires two things: ilm, knowledge, and hikmah. Both of these things, right? Now, ilm, knowledge, the first thing that you have to ask yourself as a parent, educator, whatever you are, how much have I spent to go learn how to talk to my kids? $0. We don't spend any money to do it, right? We don't, one of the things that, I've been doing marriage counseling for the last 4 years, and when kids have, people get married, they have problems in their marriage, or they have problems with their kids, and almost everybody has it, right? I asked them, how much time did you spend before you got married to figure out what marriage is? They said 0. I was like, how much time did you spend to figure out what it means to have kids before you had kids? 0. That's always the answer. Like, nobody told me what it means, right? We saw our parents do certain things, we tried to apply it as best as we could to our scenario. But the reality is that doesn't work. And I'll give you examples of people that have been able to get past that hurdle in just a few seconds. But again, this is stuff that, we have to understand. Now, how do the actual conversations go between parents and children? A parent will come to their child, and I have 4 kids that I teach privately in St. Louis. They're all Palestinian, 3 girls and 1 boy. And every time they're sitting with me, they're like, Sheikh, my mom said that if I don't do this, I'm going to Jahannam. Right? My mom said if I don't do this, I'm going to Jahannam. I'm like, where do you guys come up with this stuff from? They're like, our mom says it all the time to us. Now there's a problem in that type of tarbiyah, because every single time they do something wrong, automatic Jahannam. right? We don't think of that for ourselves because we do 100 wrong things in a day, but we're telling our kids that if you make one mistake, khalas, it's the end. There's no mercy from Allah, there's no rahmah, there's no tawbah, there's nothing. It's just straight Jahannam. This is very problematic, right? Because this doesn't convince anybody. In fact, it just makes them feel they become desensitized towards the Jahannam. They're like, oh, Jahannam is nothing, it's just made up, right? And so we have to understand how our kids come to their mistakes. How do they do these things? And not just tell them that, hey, every sin that you make leads you to Jahannam. Every sin, whether you're an adult or a child, and especially if you're a child or a young person, comes in 3 stages. Let me turn this off. It comes in 3 stages. The first stage is what we call Surah al-Habita, which is the stage of seeing imagery that destroys. What do I mean by imagery that destroys? Okay, I have my phone, I'm going through Instagram, and I see so-and-so person buys this thing. I see so-and-so person do this thing. I'm in my group chat with my friends, they're doing all of this stuff. My friends, where are they hanging out? They're hanging out at the hookah bar, watching TV, whatever it is. All of those things, they put imagery in my head of like, this is what's cool, this is what's right, this is what I should be doing. Then the second stage comes, which is tafkir fi fi'l al-habita, which is thinking about, hey, how can I get away with this sin? How can I get away with doing it without the teacher noticing, without my parents noticing? They start thinking. They might not want to do it yet, but they're just trying to figure out the ins and outs, right? The pros and cons. Then the final thing comes is that they actually commit the sin that they want to commit. And it can range from something as simple as stealing, something as huge as fornication, right? Those are the ranges. And you might think that, oh, my kids are never going to do that. You know, if you heard the stories that I have, you're going to be like, man, I don't have any hope anymore, right? They debilitate you, some of the stories that people go through, right? And so, you know, you need to reverse all of that. Now, how do we reverse all of that? How do we take away the bad imagery and then the thinking of the sin and then actually doing the sin? You reverse it by doing something else, by giving them suwarun waqiyah, by giving them good examples. What is a good example? Taking them to a masjid where they feel comfortable. Taking them and meeting scholars where they feel comfortable. If you're like, hey, in Atlanta, there's no single person that can connect with my kid, I can guarantee you that your kid is probably listening to Umar Sulaiman on their phone. Your kid is probably listening to somebody on their phone. I don't care who it is. You say, hey, if this person is the one that convinces my kid to be a practicing Muslim, let me book a ticket and go there for a weekend. Let me go to an intensive. Whatever it is. Let me give my kid examples of people that are doing it in the right way. If a lot of parents, they come up to me and they're like, oh, Sheikh, my kid finished memorizing the 30th or the 29th juz of the Quran. What should I do next? And I say, well, you should let them love the masjid and love the people of the masjid. And I give them generic answers and they get upset at me. Like, Sheikh, that's not what we mean. What we mean is that what juz should they memorize next? What accomplishment on paper should they do next? That's not the right way, because trust me, I know tons of huffaz, their parents, they force them to do everything, they memorize the Quran, and the next thing you know, they're sitting in hookah bars and doing God knows what, right? Why? Because they were never given good examples. If you give them good examples, good images, you let them listen to the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, you give them the explanation of the Quran, you find them people that hit the topics that are important to them, then what ends up happening is that the surah raqiyah, the good imagery will lead to afkar raqiyah, will lead to good thoughts. You empower your kids. You say that, hey, become a doctor so you can build masajid. Become this so you can do this. Become a lawyer. You see those Muslim students that are going through difficulties, you can go and defend them right now. You give them good images so they have good thoughts. And good thoughts lead to good actions, right? And that's how you have a jailun najihat. The Prophet ﷺ created the generation of the Sahaba by doing the same exact method. He showed them, look, these are the bad examples of the Banu Israel and the people that came before you. These are the good examples. Now it's your choice to think about them, and then you can choose your path at that point. And that's why the Sahaba were the way that they were, right? Instead of just saying that be like Zayd radiallahu anhu who wrote the Quran at 14 years old, show them how Zayd became Zayd in the first place, right? And none of this is, kalam al-nadari. It's not theoretical, by the way. This requires you to think and figure out how to do it. I'll give you one short example, which is that my niece, Now she's a little bit older, she's 8 years old. When she was like maybe 1.5 years old, she comes up to me and she says, Chachu, you're looking obese. You're looking obese. How many 1.5-year-olds do you know that know the word obese? Right? Very strange. She probably doesn't know what that means. So I asked her, what's obese? She says obese means, overweight. And then, I have a tendency to bother little kids, I mess around with them. So one day she goes like, Chachu, you're frustrating me. I was like, where did she come up with this word frustrating? So then I go to her mom and I'm like, how the heck does she know words that I didn't know until I was 14 years old? She's like, because before she was born, I started reading books to her while she was in my belly. And after she was born, even when she didn't understand anything, I was reading books to her. Right? She said I would sit there next to her and just read books, different types of books. And now when she's older, I still read books to her and she asks me, what does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? And she says that she picks up at least 70% of what I'm saying. Where did the effort start? It started way before, even before birth. And it continued. So it's not kalam al-nazari, it's not theoretical and BS talk. It's the willpower. Can I do it? And yes, parents are busy, fathers are busy, and mothers are busy, but you have to try to figure it out, right? And so this is something that you start doing, right? And I'll give you another example. When I was in St. Louis, there's a lady whose daughter, she's very well known. She's a master's level student right now, and she was like featured in many newspapers and magazines. She's read over 600 books. This girl has read over 600 books. By the time she was 20 years old, some of us might be 40, 50, 60. I don't think we've read even maybe 30, 40 books, except the ones that were required to us during our educational phase. But this child or this girl read over 600 books. And, somebody asked her parent, like, how did your child, get to the level where they wanted to read 600 books? Like, what's so special about them? She said before she hit 18, we had read over 200 books together ourselves. So the 400 after were pretty easy to do after that, right? And she said that before my child was born, I read over 200 books on how to raise a child. How many mothers are reading 200 books on how to raise a child? Both from a psychology perspective and both from an Islamic perspective. This is what success is, right? Now, you're like, but what if my kids have already gone through this phase and they're already through this? What can I do now? Guess what? You have grandkids. You always have a second chance, third chance, fourth chance. Like Allah gives you life, right? And perhaps you can even give advice to your children that might have kids already as well, right? And so this is something that you have to try to do. When I used to teach in the Sunday school, one thing that kids would come up to me and I'd be like, okay, Sunnah Sabak, which is like recite whatever your lesson is. And they're like, Sheikh, I don't know my lesson. I'm like, okay. I was like, why don't you know your lesson? They're like, Sheikh, I can't read Quran. I'm like, why can't you read Quran? They're like, Sheikh, because my parents can't read Quran. Now, can I blame that kid? No. Can I scold that kid? No. Who am I supposed to be scolding? I should be scolding the parents. I go to the parents, they're like, oh Sheikh, our time has passed, I can't learn Quran anymore, tajweed is too hard, pronunciation is too hard, blah, 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 blah. 500 excuses. That's what we say for ourselves. If you want your kids to improve and you want their development to happen, then your development also has to happen. That's the only one, right? And so, you're looking at your kids, they're getting 99% of whatever their thiqafah is, whatever their understanding is from the world, and they're getting 1% from you. If that 1% is not powerful enough, that 1% that is from the sheikh and from the parents is not powerful enough, then it's a losing game no matter what. Living in America is a losing game. That's the reality. But if you can make that 1% stronger than the rest of the 99% of trash, then you can change different things. But you have to do it not using ijbal, not forcing your kids, not bribing your kids, but actually doing iqna, right? Teaching them, convincing them. And if you can't do it, finding the people that can do it for you, right? Money should not be an issue with that, right? And so this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He says that there's 7 people under the shade of Allah's throne and one of them is a young person, it's not the young person because the young person has something special. It's because the parents and the other people developed them in a way. Imam Ahmad, he says that I only reached the level that I reached because of my mother, nobody else, right? And so, again, we have to start doing that. And so, we have to encourage our kids to read, we have to encourage our kids to learn, we have to encourage our kids to have conversations, and we have to do all of these things. If you're not putting goals in your children's lives, and you're not teaching them all these things, then you don't have to worry about where they're going to go wrong, because you haven't done anything. Most parents, they passively parent. They passively look at their children's development. They're like, oh, they're in school, no problem, that's taken care of. They're in Sunday school, that's taken care of. They're in Quran class, that's taken care of. Khalas, I'm done, I did all my job. But the actual parenting after the feeding and the drinking and all of that stuff is done. They're like, oh, there's nothing else for me to do. I just need to scream at them once in a while. That's not parenting, right? That's not developing, that's nothing. That's just going through the motions, right? In Urdu, we say, in Arabic, we say Masjid Hal. That's like the Masjid Hal method, or Jo chalta hai chalta, whatever works. That method doesn't work. So now you're probably like, okay, well, I understood all of this, but where do I begin? Because this is all for me right now. I don't know how to solidify any of this. Number one, and I want you to take care of these in your mind. Number one is get your children to the right environment, right? The right environment includes the right people, the right influences. Don't just drop them with any Hifz teacher, any Quran teacher, any Sheikh. That doesn't work, because some of those teachers are not trained to be teachers. Number two is give them role models. Find somebody that you might be 16, 17, if your kid is 12 or 13, find somebody who's 16 or 17 that's doing the right things, and say, hey, I have a son or daughter that looks up to you, right? Because maybe your kid's like basketball, and maybe there's a kid that plays basketball in the gym that's really good, and that's also memorizing Quran and is also planning on going to medical school. If you can't be the role model, then connect your kid with some sort of role model. Number three is, get them into Islamic programs, whatever it is, doesn't matter the cost, right? Number four is, do not let your kids sit around. What does that mean? Don't let them sit on this. Be like, hey, you want to sit on this, you have a time limit. You want to use this, you have a time limit, right? And even if you want to be productive, your kids should know that if you want to be productive in life, you can't just be sitting on your phone all day long, right? Unless you're doing business on your phone or some sort of something on your phone as a young person, you should be on your phone 24/7, right? Umar radiallahu anhu, he said, إِنِّي لَأَكْرَهُ أَنْ أَرَى الرَّجُلَ سَمَهْلَلًا لَا فِي عَمَلِ الدُّنْيَا وَلَا فِي عَمَلِ الْآخِرَةِ. That I hate when I see somebody just chilling and relaxing and doing nothing, right? A lot of your kids will say, I'm bored. Boredom is only the result of doing nothing. That's what boredom is, right? So he said, I hate when I see people like that are not doing anything for their dunya or for their akhirah. Umar radiallahu anhu, he walked into a masjid similar to this, and he saw a man praying sideways like this. Umar, he is famously known for taking a stick and poking people. So he takes a stick and he pokes the guy. And the guy stopped his salah and he said, why'd you poke me? He said, why are you praying like this? And he said, well, I think it's, min bab al-khudu' min bab al-tawadu, that I'm praying like this, showing Allah my humility. And Umar, he says that la tumawit alayna deenana. Don't kill our faith. Don't kill our deen. We saw how the Prophet prayed, and the Prophet never prayed this way. He never prayed in this, you're saying it's humility, but we see it as laziness, lazy praying. And then Umar, he asked the man, what do you do for a living? And he says, I sit in the masjid, I pray, I read Quran, and I do dhikr all day. And Umar again, he said, La tumawit alayna deenana. Don't kill our deen. We saw the Prophet ﷺ play, we saw him pray, and we saw him work. And we played, we prayed, and we worked. And so you have to have a healthy balance and not let your kids waste their time. Shaykh Abdul Razak al-Halabi, one of the famous Syrian scholars, he memorized the Quran after the age of 40 years old, right? Shaykh al-Islam, Sultan Izzul Ulama, one of the great Egyptian scholars, he became a student of knowledge at the age of 40 years old, right? And like this, we have tons of examples, right, in life of all these people that did this, right? All right? Why am I giving you these examples? Because you might think that, well, I can't do any of these things. Yes, you can. It's not hard to put your kids in the right environment. It's not hard to find good companionship and good role models for them. It's not hard to get them into Islamic programs. Number four thing is do the ikram of your children. What is the ikram of your children? There's a group that's called Jamaat Tabligh. Whether you like them or not, they have one thing that is good about them. That if you go to any of their programs, what's the first thing that you're going to find after every lecture? Food. Why is there food? because this is called doing ikram, honor on the kids, honoring the people that are coming. Why do they do this? أحسن إلى الناس تستعبد قلوبهم فطالما استعبد الإنسان إحسانا. فطالما استعبد الإنسان إحسانا. In Arabic we say that do good towards people. Give them food, take care of them, treat them in the best way, honor them, right? And their hearts will become your servants. And as long as they become your servants, they will show you ihsan and they'll show you goodness as well back. And so number 4 is doing the ikram, honoring the children, taking them out, field trips, games, sports, food. This is necessary. You know, when I was in South Carolina, the only complaint that I ever had towards the masjid was that every time after the halaqah was over, we have 60 kids, boys and girls, mixed, everything was there. The recipe for success was there. But as soon as the halaqah is over, they're like, Sheikh, what do we do now? What is there for us to do now? I'm like, we can play soccer in the field that has a bunch of holes in it. It doesn't work. The kids they see, they're like, oh, YMCA is offering us a perfect gym, a perfect field, a perfect that. And guess what? Those people are ready to take your kids away. They're ready to give your kids everything. But unfortunately, we as Muslims, we're not thinking in the long term, how do we get our kids? How do we do the ikram of our kids? How do we honor our kids the way that they want to be honored? Number 5 is, always have a balance between play and pray. And number 6, the one topic that really works for kids is history. You want to talk about addiction, drugs, sexual relationships, all of these different things? Yeah, you can do that for specific programs, workshops. But the one thing that inspires young people is history. The seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, the life of the companions, the life of the prophets. I'm going to be honest, as an adult, you just heard my theoretical lecture, you could say, and you're probably like, man, I'm bored right now. But if I gave you a lecture about the seerah, the life of the Prophet ﷺ, everybody's ears would be completely open. Why? Because there's a difference in it, right? There's a practical, living, breathing example of things, right? And so having these 6 things in mind: number 1, creating an environment; number 2, having role models; number 3, Islamic programming; number 4, doing the ikram, honoring the children by giving them what they need, food, environment; number 5, playing and praying, having a balance; and number 6, focusing the programming on history, and obviously in the right way. Now, something that I'm going to share at the end, which is the last thing that I'm going to share, which is that where can we start? What books can we read? There's tons of books. I'm not about to give you all the psychology books because I'm not a psychologist, an expert in psychology. You can ask any child therapist, whatever books are necessary. And any parent that you think is successful, you can take advice from them. But there are certain books that I think are very important for every Muslim to have in their household. One book is called Downpour of Blessings. It's called Downpour of Blessings by Khalid Bey. The other book is called First Things First. They're both by Khalid Bey. First Things First is a book on miscellaneous, chapters. And this book is good for high schoolers to read, and it's good for adults to read as well. It's very simple. The other book is called Downpour of Blessings. Downpour of Blessings is a book on hadith. It is like a substitute to Riyadh al-Salihin, you could say. But it's more, it's more modernized in the sense that it's more practical. The other thing is, the third book is called Being Muslim by Asad Tarsim. If you're a convert, somebody that hasn't been able to practice as well, you don't know everything, you're trying to learn everything, you want a good overview of Islam, maybe you even want to give da'wah, this is a great book. This book, Being Muslim, I had one girl, she was in medical school, a non-Muslim, she was interested in a Muslim boy, so she told the Muslim boy that give me a book about Islam. This girl, she read the book cover to cover within 1 week. Right? It's 300 pages. So it's for me, I can't read a book like that in 1 week, but mashallah, she did it, right? Another book is called In the Footsteps of the Prophet by Tariq Ramadan. Whatever your opinions are about Tariq Ramadan, set those aside, judge the book on the value of the book, right? And then there are other books. If you're looking at books in Arabic, there's Khalid Khadim al-Suruji, who wrote a book called Ummahat al-Mu'mineen, the mother of the believers. This is good for girls and sisters. Sabr al-Ulama of Abdul Fattah al-Ghudda, which is the patience of the scholars. Min Adab al-Islam. Min Adab al-Islam is translated called Islamic Etiquettes by Abdul Fattah al-Ghudda, who is a Syrian scholar. This book is good because it covers all the etiquettes that you're trying to teach your kids. Very easy book to read. And this book can be taught, and then there's other books as well. And so these are certain things that you can do. And if you want more recommendations, I can give you more recommendations. But if anybody has any questions, we can talk about the questions. Otherwise, we can relax, I guess, and socialize. You know, I think I lectured how much, like 40 minutes, 30 minutes?
Yeah, we're to wait for the food.
More for the food. Anybody have any questions, concerns? All of you guys are perfect?
The book by Khalid Beg, right?
Yeah, Khalid Beg. First things, one is called First Things First, it's a chapter book, and the other one is Downpour of Blessings. Downpour of Blessings, by the way, even as in a masjid, if you're reading hadith after salah, it's a very good investment. It's 2 volumes. You don't need to do any of the explanation. The book does the explanation for you. Very easy. So, okay. They're both very good. Even myself, like I benefited from that, both of those books as well. So,
So the masjid can or should play a significant role in youth development. So from your experience, what sort of programs in the masjid are such that actually attract the youth, so it becomes...
So the reality is that not every kid will be attracted by religious programming. It just depends on who their parents are, what environment they've had through their life. Kids are attracted to their friends. This is number one. So now you have to sort of market your programming in a way that, hey, okay, we're having this program. This program has 3 concepts. There's 3 things that have to be there. Number one is there a religious aspect to it, an educational aspect to it? This is the most important. This is the fairly easy part, by the way. The second part is the logistics aspect. This is usually not done by the imam or the coach or the mentor. This is done by community members, volunteers, board members. This is the food part, you could say, right? The third aspect is the play part. Like, okay, food is done, you filled their bellies, lecture is done, you educated their minds, but now they have all of this pent-up energy in their bodies. What are you doing to engage that aspect? Masjids, they'll do 2 out of 3 if they're semi-successful. The third part is the thing that gets neglected. Now, in other places, they'll have a gym, but they don't have anything set up, right? They don't have any sports, tournaments, nothing. So if you want a successful program, you combine all 3 and then you diversify. What do I mean by diversify? Not every kid will play basketball. Not every kid likes to eat pizza, right? Not every kid wants to listen to a story about the mothers of the believers. You diversify the program so much and you alternate within those 3 categories as much as you can, and then eventually what ends up happening is that your job or your side of the thing is done. The thing that pulls them is that, hey, all my friends are there, right? So when I was in South Carolina, I'll tell you, we started with 3 girls and maybe 10 boys, 13 kids all total. Alhamdulillah. It's a big number right for the beginning, but 13. And this is a town of 1,500 Muslims max, maybe 600 people are connected to the masjid. And so 60 people out of 600 people, almost 10% of the community is showing up for halaqah, and it's youth that are showing up. Now, we obviously the last part, the play part, you're struggling, right? I'm gonna be honest, right? Mostly because the uncles are just like, oh, we don't need any of this stuff, it's a waste of our resources, money, blah, blah, blah. That's their own choice, and that's why now the youth department is not there anymore, to be honest. So it was solely riding on the lecture and the food part. Now the lecturer is gone and the only food is left, nobody shows up, right? Unless it's like biryani or something right there, or something, then everybody show up. But you have to do all of these 3 things, and once the kids are there, like those 11 boys and 2 girls, all I told them, I was like, hey, look, I don't care whether you listen to me or not. All I care from you is just mark it. All I care is you do da'wah. How do you do da'wah? All you gotta do is each one of you report to me every week, how many friends did you text to come to the halaqah? I would give each kid the task of 3 kids. Those kids would invite their friends. Our numbers went from almost 32 girls and like 28 boys. The girls ended up beating the boys, which is normal every community, right? But the numbers increased not because I was doing anything special. It's because the kids, they took on the task to build the program on themselves, right? And then it's been about 1 year and about a half a year. Those kids themselves, now they got burnt out, I'm gonna be honest. But for the first 6 or 8 months, they carried the youth program on their own. On their own. Now those kids are like, they were, when I started they were freshmen, now they're juniors, so they're preparing for ACT, they're getting more busy. The masjid got an imam right away, to be honest, and the imam was older, so he didn't really connect with the kids. So the kids, but the interesting part is that for 8 months they self-sustained. For 8 months they found the uncles to sponsor the food, they found the parents to sponsor the food, they would do the halaqas themselves. They would do the halaqas, no sheikh, no imam, no nothing, right? But how did that start? It's because they realized that it's their own thing, own environment, right? And I'll give you one example that makes the difference. We had over there was a really big building, where they would pray Jummah. We did halaqah there 1 or 2 times. It's an open area. The kids, they didn't like it. I took them into I guess where the conference room, very small area, and stuck all 60 kids in one room. And they all no adults could pass by, nobody could walk by, and the halaqah's engagement tripled. I'm talking about back and forth, debating, going back and forth with me. And I asked the kids, I was like, what made the difference when we were sitting down there, more open space, more breathing, you can stretch out your legs, no problem. They're like, Sheikh, we don't care about that. We care that we can say what we want to say, however we want to say it. We want that environment. And so for me, I think those things, overall, if you're able to take those 3 factors, utilize them towards whatever community you're in, you can sort of hit the kids no matter who they are. And then at the end of the day, every kid has to negotiate their own religion, right? What I mean by that is that, I went to halaqah and, for high school, just maybe, not last Friday, but the Friday before that. There's maybe 40 kids in there in the high school. One of the teachers from the high school sponsored it. And about 2 kids were messing around the whole halaqah, right? And obviously when you're speaking and you're a speaker, you see 2 kids messing around, you just want to grab them and straighten them out, right? Now, that's how I felt, right? And so, what do you call it? I'm glad I don't do any of that stuff, but, that was my feeling in my heart. And, after the halaqah was over, those 2 kids came to me and they're like, Sheikh, we were bored with your lecture. And I asked the other 38, they're like, Sheikh, we absolutely enjoyed your lecture. From this, I realized that the issue wasn't my lecture. The issue was the state of the kid themselves, right? Not every kid is ready. But the good thing about those 2 kids that didn't enjoy the lecture was they still showed up. And the next time I give a lecture, they'll still show up. And next time I go, they'll still show up. Why? Because their friends have taken the responsibility of grabbing them. And eventually when they hit 17, 18, and a little bit more understanding comes in their brain, 19, 20, 21, 22, and their mind opens up, they're like, I remember some good things that I learned at one point in my life. You cannot control the outcome. Sheikh can't, imam can't, teacher can't, parents can't. You can't control the outcome. You can only control the work that's being done. And so it's a long process, but that's the long answer to your question. So
It makes sense. Exactly.
that's the method. It's the same method we apply to adults as well. To be honest, right?
Yeah.
If you have a lecture and there's no biryani or what's on the menu today?
Monday, chicken
Monday,
Monday.
yeah, that's not on the menu, khalas, right?
No one's gonna show up.
No one's gonna show up. We apply the same method, so.
We trust brother Naeem, he takes care of us. So. Good.
And pizza too.
Pizza too, alhamdulillah. Catering to everyone, all the new guys.
Keep everybody happy.
Chef, can you please tell us the book name again?
So the first book is called First Things First by Khalid Beg. The second book is called Downpour of Blessings by Khalid Beg. Let me get the other book's names.
B-A-I-G.
First two is
Khalid Beg is B-A-I-G. Yeah, good. Khalid is spelled the way Khalid is
third one
spelled.
we missed.
Another book is called Being Muslim by Asad Tarsim. You can give this to even a non-Muslim, a new convert. It's probably the best book to give to a new convert or some young person that just started practicing Islam. The fourth book is In the Footsteps of the Prophet. Generally, I recommend In the Footsteps of the Prophet first because it attaches them to the Prophet first, and then all the other books after.
you were in South Carolina for how long?
2 years.
2 years. Then you went back to St. Louis.
Yeah, my wife, she started in, we were trying to get married, so, I kind of had to leave. Otherwise, her father would not have agreed to our marriage if I still lived in South Carolina. You know, so yeah.
No. And you've been in St. Louis for how long after moving back?
It's been 1 year and, March, April, 1 year and 2 months,
Ah,
so,
14 months precisely.
yeah, 14 months.
Good, good.
What time is the mother someone? Oh, we got 30 minutes.
Yeah.
20 minutes.
Any question from sisters?
Are there any questions from the sisters? Any corrections, any mistakes that I made? No problem. Feedback, you're welcome. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you just talk about yourself a little bit?
Okay, myself a little bit. Okay, good. That's a good question, I guess. Alhamdulillah. So I'm originally from Karachi, from Pakistan. I never lived there, but I was born there. My mother was a citizen before I was born, and my father as well. I moved here when I was 6 months to St. Louis, Missouri. I attended the Islamic school there up until 7th grade. And 8th grade, I decided to memorize the Quran. So alhamdulillah, I memorized the Quran in 10 months. After that, those 10 months, my parents only gave me like 1 year. They said 1 year, that's it, you memorize it, great, otherwise get this out of your brain or whatever. And so, what do you call it, I finished alhamdulillah in 10 months because of two of my best friends. They were both Algerian, both soccer players, and mashallah, both of them are doctors now. And so, I memorized Quran. After I memorized Quran, I went to high school. I graduated high school in 3 years from a regular public high school. After that, I taught Quran for a little bit of time locally, and then I went to California. I was at UC Berkeley for a little bit, as well as Zaytuna College, so I did both of them simultaneously. After that, I got accepted to Medina, so I dropped everything, and I just left. And I lived there for about 5.5 years, and then COVID hit. And so when COVID hit, my last semester, which was the first time in Islamic University's 60 years of history that they had an online semester ever. So I had an online semester in America when I graduated. I got my degree and everything. And then after that, while I was in my last semester, I got a call from a community in Greenville, South Carolina, saying that, hey, our imam just quit on us. We got your number from so-and-so kid, like a chain of a bunch of MSA students. Like, one of the MSA students, he was in St. Louis at Washington University in St. Louis. His father was the president of the Masjid there. And so they're like, hey, we want you to come. I came, I visited, and I was like, okay, yeah, I'm sold, no problem. And so I went, and I spent, as soon as the day that I graduated was the day that I went straight to South Carolina. So I spent 2 years and a month there. I was the imam there, alhamdulillah. Most of my work focused on obviously doing the regular duties of the imam, leading salah, doing Jummah. There was no other masjid in the whole city. There's one in Spartanburg, which is about 45 minutes away, but it's sort of like 2 or 3 doctors live there, nobody else lives there. So alhamdulillah, I was the imam there. I did regular salahs, khutbahs, khatiras, lectures, and then most of my focus was on my weekly youth program. And so that's what I did for the most part, and then obviously other things. And then after that, I moved back to St. Louis. The last year in St. Louis, I'm at a masjid that I told the board here that it's a non-residential masjid, meaning people don't live near it. So it's been dead for the last 8 years before I got there. The previous imam was like 80 years old. He had Parkinson's. Khutbah was like an hour long. MashaAllah, may Allah reward him. He did a lot of great stuff when he was younger, but serving for a long time takes a toll on a person. And so when I came, the masjid was sort of like not functioning as well, maybe 2 or 3 people for salahs if they were lucky. And then after that, alhamdulillah, we started doing a weekly program. That weekly program has 150 to 200 people show up every week. For that area, it's huge because everybody has to drive to come. So it means the program is good. And then the second thing, that our Jummah numbers went from 350 to 700 people because of timeliness, not because I'm a good lecturer or anything like that. By starting on time, ending on time, it makes a difference. And then besides that, my focus was on the MSAs and youth groups. There's no youth group in my masjid because of the nature of no parents will drive their kids to that place, it's too far. So I usually do my youth work outside of the masjid. There's a larger masjid where I grew up in. The youth group there has about 200 girls and like maybe 50 boys, which is another example where the girls always beat the boys. Alhamdulillah, so I do regular halaqas for them once a month, and then the MSAs, there's about 8 MSAs, and so once a week I alternate and I go between each MSA and I do a program with them, depending on the topics they're interested in. Usually it's more of a discussion because that age group they're not as shy as the older people are, or they're really younger people, so alhamdulillah. But that's a little bit about myself, that's what I've done and everything. What do I like? I like basketball. Everything else is whatever, so alhamdulillah. I hope that answered it.
Any questions?
No, it's okay. He's putting you on the spot. It's all good.
Yeah. No, he was excited to come meet you, so I said, I'm sure.
I usually have questions when I come to Hollywood.
MashaAllah. I would say let's make dua, but it's not Friday, so.
Yeah. I think the food is about to arrive any minute.
I have a question.
Sure.
Where did you study?
I studied in Medina.
I don't know if I missed it in the beginning, but what was your specialization in your education?
Okay, so let me answer both of your questions at the same time. Okay, so I studied in Medina. I spent 2 years studying Arabic, alhamdulillah. After graduating from the Arabic program, I spent 4 years studying Sharia, Islamic law. My focus in Islamic law was comparative Islamic law, so it's, where you go to a typical madrasa or a jamia, it's like, okay, you're either Hanafi, Shafi'i, Maliki, or Hanbali, which are the 4 dominant schools of law that are practiced in the Muslim world today. Where in Medina University, in terms of the Sharia program, we don't study a particular school of law, we study all of them simultaneously. So you're studying what did Imam Abu Hanifa say, what did Imam Malik say, what did Imam Shafi'i say, what did Imam Ahmed say, what are their proofs, why did they differ, and if you have a really overzealous teacher that thinks that he might know more than the 4 Imams, he'll give his opinion at the end, right? But most of the time they don't do that. They have enough humility, to be like, okay, these are the opinions, and whatever you're, not necessarily whatever you're comfortable follow. It's like more like, okay, you have your own personal school of law that you're following outside. So what students will do is that, for example, if you are coming to the university to study and you don't have a background in a particular school of law, you're going to get lost because all of them will convince you. All of them have proofs. All of them have evidences, right? And all of them are like, these are not just random people saying stuff. It's the 4 Imams or whatever. And so you have to study your own school of law, right? For myself, I studied Hanbali and Shafi'i fiqh. 2 of those were my primary focus outside of the university. And so I did that to supplement my studies in the university. Otherwise, you'll graduate and you'll be more confused. Then you gain less clarity. You're going there to gain clarity about religion, and you gain less clarity because you're not using the proper manhajiyah. Now you might be wondering, why is the curriculum set up that way? That doesn't make any sense. Why isn't it like a typical madrasa, like a Deobandi madrasa, or like Azhar that has 3 different tracks? The reason why is because the student body is so diverse. There's 170 nationalities. If you teach a Moroccan kid Hanafi fiqh or Hanbali fiqh or Shafi'i fiqh, and then they go back to Morocco and the government runs on Maliki fiqh, and the masajid run on Maliki fiqh, and everybody runs on Maliki fiqh or whatever, and this kid starts saying that that's wrong and that's wrong and that's wrong and that's wrong, the poor kid is gonna get beat in the streets, you know what I'm saying? So the idea is to avoid that by giving them enough of a understanding in the scope, and also to end sectarianism, right? Sometimes you have a particular imam of a specific sway, and because of that specific sway, he says, we're only going to do this. We're only going to start Ramadan this way, not the other way, whatever it is, different issues, right? And so the idea is to avoid that. Now, does that does that level of thinking reach every student? No, it doesn't reach every student. Some students are black and white and they are hardcore or whatever it is. But the idea behind the original founders of the University of Medina, which included scholars from India, Pakistan, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, and Sudan, 5-6 countries, and Jordan and Syria, 7-8 countries. All of them were like, you could say like they were in the 70s, 60s, 50s, all that time, they were all like prominent scholars. So their mindset was like, hey, we need to create a curriculum that will work for all of our countries. And wherever a graduate graduates from, they'll be able to serve them properly. Does it work? That's debatable on each student. If they have an understanding of the history, then yeah, it does work. So, yeah.
So I guess what school of thought do you follow?
Well, I'm Hanbali. I'm not Hanbali in the sense that like, oh, we have to follow the Hanbali method or something like that. It's like, if you're Hanafi, no problem. You're Shafi'i, no problem, right? The majority of the issues are in fiqh, they're tertiary issues. They're not like fundamentals. Like we're all praying salah, we're all giving zakat, right? We're all fasting in the month of Ramadan. Now there's tiny issues where if you ask me, I'll be like, hey, this is what this school of law says, and this is what this school of law says. Now, if a person is like, hey, I only want one school of law, if I know the answer, I'll give it to them. But majority of the times, if I don't know the answer, I'm like, hey, give me an hour, give me 2 hours, give me a day, give me a week, and I'll get back to you. Because there's no point in answering a question on a half-baked answer. But I follow the Hanbali school of law mostly because I find it to be the most convincing for myself. Also, I had the most resources living in that particular country. Right? Saudi Arabia is, you either have like I don't want to use these words because they're divisive, you have like the Salafi movement or whatever, or you have like the traditional Hanbali scholars, right? And so both of them are there. And so for me to actually do tadarruj or to go up in knowledge, you sort of have to have a track. Otherwise you'll be one of those sheikhs that just make up whatever they want to make up, right? And so that's what I studied. Not in the sense that it's like, oh, I have to follow this, like it's the law. It's more like it's, these are the fundamentals, these are the principles. Wherever maybe perhaps another school of law is more, facilitates ease for the community, then you go with the other opinion. And that's what I meant by like, that's the reason why we study the schools of law, so that you come up with a broader picture so that you can deal with any sort of community instead of just like, you gotta do it this way, I hope that makes sense. Yeah.
I know you probably already mentioned it, but how long have you been in Japan for?
This is my 4th year.
Do you recommend just following one school of law, or is it, like, I know it's like you have different schools of thought. Some people say you just need to follow one school of thought. Some people say you can't mix and match, and while the others like, you can follow whatever you want. All 4 imams are right.
So I'm gonna be honest, the majority of sheikhs and imams that you're probably listening to have no clue what they're talking about when it comes to this issue. They heard it from their teacher or their school of thought or from their madrasa, and they're just regurgitating whatever they're saying. If you want an academic response, I can give you an academic response, or I can give you a response like theirs, right? I'll give you the academic response because it'll be more convincing. We have something in Islam, it's called talfiq. Talfiq is where you mix and match between schools of law. Many of the scholars that are trying Muslims not to do that, they'll say, oh, if you do talfiq, like they'll give you a very famous example, which is the example of wudu, right? If you do talfiq, you bleed, oh, in the Hanafi school of law, your wudu breaks. You touch your wife in the Shafi school of law, your wudu breaks. They'll give you this example in order to tell you not to mix and match. Look, by the way, this is the only example there is. There's no other example. This is one thing. Second thing, but I'm not encouraging mixing and matching, by the way. I'm just trying to explain to you the whole issue itself, right? The second thing is that should you follow a school of law? And is there a school of law for a commoner? There is no school of law for a commoner. What does this mean? Oh, what are you talking about? I thought I was supposed to be Hanafi or Shafi'i or whatever. Yes, if you're from the subcontinent, generally you're going to be Hanafi. If you're from like Palestine, you're going to be Shafi'i. If you're from Syria, you could be either, right? If you're from Morocco and Mauritania, you're most likely going to be Maliki. Not because you studied those schools of law and you know the details. It's because by natural, osmosis, you pick up things and you practice those things. You don't know why you're practicing them. So for you to say, I'm Hanafi, you're not Hanafi. You're just a Muslim that learned certain things. Like for example, myself, before studying, I could never call myself Hanafi or Hanbali because I didn't study anything. After studying, you can say, oh, I'm a Hanbali, I'm Shafi'i, I'm Maliki, whatever you are. But before that, you're not really anything. Now, so what is your school of law? That's the question comes. Your school of law is dependent on two things. The country that you live in, which if you're in the Muslim country, it's pretty fairly easy. But now let's say you're living in America, what's the second thing? Then your madhab is the madhab of the imam of your masjid. Or whatever imam you look up to, sheikh that you look up to. And that's dependent on you, who you find to be reliable in terms of their knowledge. They don't just, make stuff up or just, beat around the bush or give you like those 10-second fatwas or whatever. Like somebody's knowledgeable, that's your madhab, right? That's your school of law. And this is the opinion of the majority of scholars. Al-ammi la madhaba lahu. That the commoner, there is no madhab for him, right? The madhab of the ammi is the madhab of their teacher, their sheikh, right? And so that's the thing. Now, can you follow school of law? Certainly, why not? No problem. You want to be Hanafi, be Hanafi. You want to be Malik, be Malik. You want to be Shafi'i, be Shafi'i. You want to be Hanbali, be Hanbali. No problem. But that shouldn't cause you to force your opinion on somebody else. You want to practice the way you want to practice. And like I said, they're all two share issues. Guess what? On the day of judgment, when you die, Allah is not going to ask you, was your hand below your navel? Was it above your navel? Allah is not going to ask you whether you did Raful Yadayn or you didn't do Raful Yadayn. Allah is not going to ask you, was your nisab this amount or that amount? Allah is not going to ask you, did you do this part of Hajj first or this part of Hajj? Allah is not going to ask you any of that stuff. He's going to ask you, did you do Hajj? Did you pray Salah? Did you fast? Those are the questions that are going to be asked. And again, these schools of law, we have a misconception. We think that they are things that are telling us what our deen are. No, they are answering the questions for those things that are not 100% clear, right? They're sort of, evidence-based things that they're stipulating or interpreting, right? So the schools of law are they're like a magnet for the Quran and the Sunnah. You have the Quran and the Sunnah, and then you have these madahib or these schools of law that say, here's the magnifying glass to understand it. Now, you might not agree with everything. For example, I had originally studied the Shafi'i madhab. And for anybody that studied the Shafi'i madhab, everybody will tell you, oh, don't study the Shafi'i madhab, by the way. Why? Because number one, when you're buying and selling, right? If you're a Shafi'i and you're buying and selling, you have to do what's called, I can't remember the words anymore. You have to do ijab and qabul, just like you do in marriage, right? You have to give a proposal and then you have to do an acceptance when you're buying and selling, right? Now this is very problematic because if you go to Walmart, well, don't go to Walmart because they support Zionism. Let's say you go to Target, right? You go to Target and you're at the self-checkout. There's no ijab and qabul there. There's nobody saying, here, I'm selling you this and you buy this. Then technically, according to that school of law, your transaction is not valid, right? You just stole something technically, even if you paid. Now, this, if you're looking at it, you're like, man, this is nonsensical. This doesn't make any sense. So at that point, the Shafi'i will be like, hey, maybe I need to consider the Hanafi opinion in this. And you, by the way, I'll give you another example. You'll find, this is a hysterical example, you'll find, and again, I'm not calling any group out, right, but I'm going to give you an example. You'll find a lot of Deobandis, scholars, they'll say that we depend on local moon sighting. No problem, depend on local moon sighting, right? But if you ask them, what's the opinion of Imam Abu Hanifa, the school of law that you claim to follow yourself? They'll be like, I don't know. And you tell them, well, the opinion of Imam Abu Hanifa is not actually local sighting, it's global sighting. What happened? They left the school of law to practice something else because there are other scholars that had their other opinions. So the idea is it's not as black and white as people will make you think. But as a regular person, what can you do practically? Follow the imam or sheikh or that you trust. Don't just go up to any random person. Find somebody that you trust, somebody that you have certainty in their credentials, and somebody that you have certainty in the way that they explain things. A lot of kids that ask Sheikh, can I take knowledge from TikTok? I don't know if you guys know what TikTok is, right? You guys know what TikTok is, like 10-second things. They're like, can I take knowledge from TikTok? Ibn Umar, he said, somebody told Ibn Umar, Ya Ibn Umar, deenuka deenuk, your deen is your deen. Innama huwa lahmuk wa damuk, it is your blood and your meat. Fanzur amman ta'khudh deenak, look to who you take your deen from. خُذْ عَنِ الَّذِينَ اسْتَقَامُوا, take from those people that are upright. وَلَا تَأْخُذْ عَنِ الَّذِينَ مَالُوا, don't take from those people that wishy-washy, going right and left. Their opinion is changing every day. There's no problem in changing opinions, but their opinions are like this. They're not righteous, they're not upright. And so you find somebody who's upright, righteous, somebody who you have certainty in their knowledge, you figure out where they studied. A lot of times if you ask the regular musallis, where did your imam graduate from? Allah knows, but he's a sheikh, no problem. That's not the right mentality. You have to know where they studied from, who their teachers are. Because when they give you an answer and it ends up being wrong, or you end up making life decisions based off of it, and then you come back to them and you say that, hey, you gave me the wrong advice. Like, oh, well, I didn't know anything. I haven't studied anything. You asked me, I give you an opinion. But it's your fault at that point. So again, like I said, it's not a black and white issue. You can, but there's a lot of factors involved. I hope that sort of gave you a whole picture of everything, inshallah. Yeah.
Overall, a Muslim, normal Muslim,
Yeah.
that has no Mahdi Mazhab, does not have a Mazhab. So, unless you study the four schools, then you choose what one you want and you follow, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Otherwise you have no Mazhab.
yeah, so that's the opinion of the majority of the scholars. The reason why that's the opinion is because the reality is not everybody has the time to study a madhab. Right? Nobody in here is going to be like, hey, let me study this primer, then the next one, then the next one. Nobody's going to do that. Now, you know naturally by your parents what they taught you. Right? So, alhamdulillah, there's no problem, no problem with that, right? They're all in attempt to understand the Quran.
You wanna go to Gaza? It's time for Maghrib.
Maghrib. Okay.